Good morning, everyone. And can you hear me? Welcome to the continuing series on life, love, loss. Today, we're concentrating on my searching for my roots, a wild dragon chase that began in 1984 and continued till 2017. My first search for my roots, for what my mother called Dragonfield Village, began accidentally. It was thrust upon me by well-meaning Chinese officials during my posting to China as Peking correspondent in 1984. I was in Beijing, the capital, and preparing a series of television stories on Chinese Australians, Chinese who'd gone and lived and worked in Australia, then returned to China, but maintained links with the motherland. So from Beijing, I contacted Canton Foreign Affairs in Guangdong province and asked them to find family members in the 4 counties Zhongshan area. That's the area where most of the early Chinese came to Australia for the gold and tin mines. And in the course of conversation, I happened to mention that my family comes from Dragonfield Village. I said that because at the time, it was necessary to have an alien's permit to go to this area, and I was keen to get there. But I had no idea of the trouble the name of that village would cause. And when I went south, I met the Singapore-based cameraman, Willie Pua, and we joined up with Lu Jian in Canton. We're pictured here outside Sun Yat-sen's home in Canton. And from Canton, the 3 of us, Willie Pua, the cameraman, and Lu Jian, the Canton official, we traveled for an entire day in a minivan in stifling heat, over numerous bumpy roads, numerous ferries as we crossed tributaries of the Pearl River. And finally, at the end of the day, we arrived in Taishan County. And then we booked into the Garden Hotel. Next day, we met the interpreter, the Taishanese interpreter. We needed an interpreter because although the cameraman could speak Mandarin, English, Hainanese, Cantonese, and the Cantonese official could speak Cantonese, English, and some other dialect, neither of them could speak Taishanese. And interpreter Chen burst with excitement. We have found 40 Dragonfield villages in Taishan, and 14 with a clan named Chung. But so far, none with any overseas links, let alone with Australia. Chung, I repeated, Dragonfield Village. Oh, I'm sorry. When I mentioned that my family comes from Dragonfield Village, I meant my mother's family, the Jins, who changed their name to Henry. I didn't know you were looking for my ancestral home. I don't know of any connections in China whatsoever. Oh, well, never mind, said crestfallen Chen. We should have told you, but we wanted to surprise you. But there is one family in the far south who remember vaguely some elderly person going away to some foreign land long ago, and they're expecting a visit. So I had no choice but to play the part. Next day, we went again in the minivan for several hours to the impoverished south. The beautiful colonnade architecture of the county centre gave way to laughing village boys and village girls, peasants bent over in rice paddies or ploughing with the aid of a buffalo, tributaries of the Pearl River, terrace plateaus. The paved roads gave way to dirt tracks, and finally we stopped in the mud. An entire village of 400 men, women, and children were lined up to greet us. And as young Mrs. Chung helped me alight from the van, I heard a collective gasp. In that era of mouth suits, when makeup was reserved for the stage and high heels unheard of, I wore just casual Western gear, little makeup, my blow-waved hair, shoulder length, and some nail varnish peeping from the straps of my sandals. I was so exotic. They had never seen anyone as exotic as me, nor had they ever encountered a cameraman with his tripod and heavy gear. Mrs. Chung Jr. introduced me to Mrs. Chung Sr., steadied by her stick. And as the crowd jostled around us and jostled behind us, we were forced up a lane and into her begrimed home. There we were seated on specially provided new plastic chairs and served steaming hot tea. While old Mrs. Chung, the matriarch, through interpreter Chen, spoke to me, young Mrs. Chung stood fanning me with a large palm frond. Mrs. Chung related, long ago, long before I was born, my father went off to some red-haired devil land. But what foreign land? I probed. England, America, Australia, Qinguo, Megwo, Adalia, or I don't know, she said, pointing to the South China Sea. All I know is he went off to some devil land. It was quite clear to me that this village had no overseas links. If the 400 villages could not between them produce one whirring electric fan, they had no links with overseas. Because by 1984, the airports of Beijing, Shanghai, and Canton groaned with boxes of fans and sometimes a television set from rich overseas Chinese to their impoverished kin. Nonetheless, we stood outside, the 11 members of this particular Chung family and I. None of them related to me, but we didn't mention that. At least I disturbed the monotony of this dragon-field village. Chen then determined we drive further south to another village, more impoverished, but with the name Qin. No luck. We kept driving further until we entered a village and a particular Jin home where pigsty merged seamlessly into straw-filled home. only in the darkness of the night did Chen finally admit defeat. That experience made me reflect on my origins, and back in Australia, I finally took some interest in my family history. And that would expand over the years, over the decades, till 40 years later, when here in Hobart again, in 2024, I produced, with the help of other family members, this family history of my mother's Jin Henry family and my father's Chin Chung family. And that won the Tasmanian Family History Society Award for the year. My ignorance of my roots dates back to my childhood in white assimilationist Australia. In my first year at school, St Mary's College, in this picture titled Representatives of Various Countries, Leheen and I are pictured on the front row, Leheen on the right, me on the left, with a cousin, an older cousin at the top. Now, when she leaves, Leheen and I are the only two Chinese for almost all the remaining of my total 13 years at school, except till in my last year, two younger cousins join. So being the only ones and being so different from them, with our different coloured skin and with our black hair, we were of course taunted as Ching Chong Chinamen. Now that's a racial slur that's now so outdated. Many, if not most, Australians don't even know about it. And I can even turn it on its head and satirize myself with my memoir, Ching Chong China Girl. But as a child in 1950s Hobart, all I wanted was to fit in. When my mother spoke to me in Chinese in front of my friends, I squirmed with embarrassment. I wanted to disappear into the earth. Anyone heard speaking a language other than English aroused suspicion. People gaped as though watching monkeys perform under the circus tent. When I was about to leave school, a family friend suggested, "You're Chinese. You could go to Canberra, to the ANU, and learn Cantonese, and then maybe work for Radio Australia in the Cantonese section." I was horrified. Learning Chinese is the last thing I want to do, I said. Being Chinese is bad enough. Why learn to speak Chinese? I'm told I could speak the Four Counties dialect as a child, that I was fluent up until the age of 2.5, when my grandmother died and the family found less need to use Chinese. They often spoke in a mixture of English and Chinese, which I understood, but I couldn't speak. Although my mother, like most of her siblings, was born in Hobart, she spoke of going back to China as a 5-year-old. She spoke of going back to the village. The whole family talked about village. They talked about Taishan, or really Toishan, it was called then in the village dialect. But no one talked about Wilbur. It's only after I returned from China that I learnt that this northeastern tin mining area, Wilbur, played a crucial role in my origins. And after I gave a public lecture at Utas in May 1987, and Margareta Poss wrote 2 stories published by the Mercury, I received a letter from the nearby St. Helens History Room. The curators seemed to confuse my maternal Jin family with Welboro's famous Marmon Chin family, and they invited me there to show me around. So in December that year, my partner and I ferried from Melbourne to Devonport, and we drove from Devonport via Launceston to Welborough. I wore my Tai-Shan-made sneakers to what I thought was my Tasmanian homeland. The once thriving Chinese mining settlement that bustled with some 1,000 Chinese miners, and sometimes many more, now had but 57 souls. The pub held a porcelain statue of a goddess donated on behalf of the Chinese community by my uncle, Gordon Henry. Peter Burns, curator of nearby St. Helens History Room, co-curator with his wife, showed us around the cemetery, the monument where Chinese burnt incense to their ancestors and prayed to their gods, and the abandoned mining site. I pictured my grandfather there as a 16-year-old in 1901. He'd come all the way from China in search of his father, who'd never sent any remittances home. And when he found his father in an opium den, he understood why. In the loneliness of the mining camp, with the back-breaking work, great-grandfather Jin had sought solace in opium, and like so many of the other miners, he had become an addict. His son, grandfather Jin, worked tirelessly, and within 2 years saved enough to send his father to go back to China to die in the village. I imagined grandfather turning on the taps, as was his role, in the dead of night, at 4 a.m. in icy, frosty winter, turning on the taps for the water that is essential to alluvial mining. And in nearby Garibaldi, when Peter Burns showed me this pig oven, I imagined grandfather having a treat at Chinese New Year and tasting a little roast pork. I met the reclusive and suspicious of me last surviving part Chinese Ron Chintok. Here are 3 of the last surviving miners posing in their Sunday best for a photograph in 1914. More than 3 decades after my 1984 dragon chase, I sign up for Kate Bagnall's and Sophie Couchman's Chinese Australian Heritage Tour. But realizing how busy they are, fending queries from Australian Chinese, searching for their roots from all around Australia, getting all these requests and having to handle them, I also turn to a cousin, Peter Chung, whom I'd known as a child. That's Peter on the far left. He's the oldest in the group. He's about 12. Leheen and I, seated in the center, are much younger. So I turn to him again after all these years of the childhood, because after my parents' divorce, I really saw hardly anything of the Qings, and I knew nothing about them. Now, as adults, I find Peter a mine of Qing information, and helpful too, on the Jins. So on Thursday, the 16th of March, 2017, I fly Melbourne to Hong Kong. On arrival, I ferry to China's border city of Zhuhai, one of the original special economic zones of Deng Xiaoping. And I'm met by a Zhuhai Hobartian, Qinguo Zhen. She has been introduced to me by Peter Chung over China's WeChat. Now, Qinguo's English is limited, but her friend Jenny Lai's total lack of English proves no hindrance to her Peugeot purring for 2 hours along a freeway part-tunneled through mountains to Taishan County, now called Taishan City. I'm checking into the Taishan Joss, room 1403 with panoramic views over a beautiful lake, when Qinguo introduces me to a new Utas graduate, Taishan Hobartian Victoria Chen. She is fluent in English and the 4 counties Taishanese dialect. I am armed with 4 photographs taken by my Hobart-born Helen Henry cousin in 2010, and we hope to find the village and the keeper of the key by using these photographs. My smattering of mangled Mandarin to non-English speaking, nonplussed hotel clerks doesn't help pinpoint the village. When Qinguo suddenly says, we know where to go in neighboring Kaiping city, my village has been rezoned from Taishan to Kaiping. So, over 40 minutes, aided by Jenny's GPS, my expectant triad and I wander into Dragonfield Village. Yet no amount of head scratching and poring over photos by the elders leads to my Jin home. Ooh, never seen house number plates like that, says one. Oh, such intricate door windows, pipes up another. So back into the car, we travel further until we reach another Dragonfield village. It has a high curved entrance arch topped by a sinuous golden dragon. But number 2 also proves a dud. Undeterred, we ask directions at a police station. And then, as the sun sets and traffic peaks, we maneuver along highways and bridges and past neon-lit streets until darkness delivers a charcoal bricked arch with an ochre tiled roof. This Dragonfield village has a weathered shrine to ancestors. But its 2 gods seated behind incense sticks don't beckon me. It's 7:30 Thursday night. Tired, cold, hungry, we take a break and drop into some place for a simple buffet. I've travelled 7,500 kilometers for what? My heart tumbles down to my heavy timberland boots. Maybe next week I console myself when I join Kate and Sophie's tour group in Hong Kong, headed for the counties. Maybe then I'll find my village. Kate had said she could find it and that we could all visit, but nothing about my village appears on the itinerary, and I can't stay on after the tour because of commitments back home. Oh well, it was a long shot. Then Jinju stands up. Let's try another police station. It's almost 9 o'clock when Tan Zhen Police Superior Charleston Lau asks staffers to compare our photographs with computer records. And within minutes, jaws drop as Policeman Wang reveals the libraries in the Lechong village group. We'll take you there, announces the policeman Lau. That's the police station, top left, and we're headed to the right side of the map. Lau is very efficient. In the police van, seated behind Lau and the driver, I'm incredulous as we pass through Kaiping's flickering coloured lights into the village gloom. It takes 10 minutes. That's it. The police torch lets me match the library's pink wall, a tiled wall, with the picture. And with trepidation, under police torchlight, I step down the narrow lane 5 to the blue house plate, number 9, against grey brick, exactly like the photograph. Left of the plate hangs a double-panelled wooden front door, but unlike the photo, with one window frame missing. The window frame's absence lets me see between several removable round wooden bars which secure the house while admitting fresh air. My heart sings. This is a dream home built by grandfather Jinjiang Henry in 1931, after he left Tasmania's tin mining town of Wildsmith, and with the accumulation of his success as a fruit merchant in Hobart, he was able to take his 5th visit back to China with his whole family and build his dream home that he designed himself in Hobart. He would live here for 3 years until returning via Brisbane to Hobart. This is the Henry family, circa 1940, as many of you have seen, all standing as the photographer strangely placed them in the order in which they would die. The grandparents, front center, Lester, top left, he would die first in 86, followed by Fawn, Gordon, head of the family, Joyce, the firstborn, Mari, the baby, and my mother Dorothy, the last of her generation, to go in 2020. Grandfather Henry has sunken cheeks, is not well, and will soon succumb to tuberculosis, aged 56. This is the house where grandmother Mary Lam Lee left silver jewellery hidden to enjoy in her retirement. This is the house that Uncle Gordon fought to retrieve from the communists before the other 5 siblings signed over their share to Big Brother Fon and his wife Arth Law, because they had both been born in China and stayed in the house long after the rest of the family returned to China. Impatient to see inside and aided by torchlight, I photograph the dilapidated entrance, the kitchen beyond and other rooms behind the bars. Now, I know what my mother went. When, as a child in Hobart, I heard her talk about the village and Taishan, even though it's now in Kaiping. It's 10 o'clock, almost 1 a.m. in Hobart. Too late to disturb anyone to find the keeper of the key. I'd taken off just before 1 a.m. Australian Eastern summertime. On day 1, I found what I'm after. Police have caught my dragon. I feel Tasmania and Taishan as one. Next morning, we drive with Lau through the high-arched green village gate beside the banyan tree to park between the village buildings and the lake. An agile tricyclist wonders what we're about, while a young mother with child in hand strolls by the library in the 80-member village. Another elder recognizes one of the 2 locals in the photograph. Ah, Mrs. Zhen's passed away, but she's given the key to her son, Delian. And when he appears and unlocks the door,
Để phỏng mà rú xiên đến ngờ ca đi.
Muộn nó học là vậy học cái kiến định của muộn nó nếu mà muộn à.
Đừng có học lời chính mình mà.
Không có ai muộn.
Đã ai muốn à? Cái áo
Không có
chân
kiến
của
định
tổng này không
đó.
à?
Mà nó khuôn lĩnh ở qua.
Hãy subscribe cho kênh Ghiền Mì Gõ để không bỏ
I'm saddened by the ravages of neglect, especially the kitchen where young Dorothy helped her mother poach fish and chop up pork. They had 3 moi-mois, or little sisters, to help with the housework. But it's a substantial house with some 10 rooms over 2 floors, solidly built with some finely turned woodwork and some striking religious relics. An atrium looking up to the shrine on the upper floor. I tried to imagine how beautiful the shrine and the intricate lacework looked back in the 1930s. Shutters on either side of the upper floor open onto a terrace with so much potential and views in every direction. For a home that's battle-scarred by both invading Japanese and rampaging Red Guards, it's weathered not badly. These are the slogans painted by Red Guards during the Cultural Revolution of 1966 to 76. I'm summoned to meet the village bureaucrat, Qinguo Zhen. Oh, another Zhen? I ask myself. Then it hits me. Just as grandfather Jin's Taishanese name is Yen in Cantonese, it's Zhen in Mandarin. So everyone in this village is a Jin, a Yen, or a Zhen, or all three. I wish to stay and feel and examine further every space, but I can't. I'm required to appear in another group photograph with police and security, as well as my own team. I'm bundled into the van and obliged to leave. I feel a sense of regret, longing. Like most of the unoccupied and abandoned homes of overseas Chinese, ours is a place of history, mystery, and sadness. I feel it should be restored. At least a Melbourne friend uses my pictures and satellite images to draw plans of the 3 floors of the house. Not bad for someone who's never stepped foot in China. Yet restoration could cost a fortune. And to what avail? Who would live here? Who would sacrifice life in the West for this? And what are the legal status? Here there's no rule of law, only law of rule. The village has already diminished in size from 200 to only 80 in 2017. By Saturday afternoon, I'm in neighbouring Qinguo city, where my paternal grandfather, Willie Chung Sing, built an elegant house, where my father was born in 1920. He was able to build this house while keeping his place in the village, but he decided he would like to show off his wealth by having a big house in the capital of the county. That's my father there, not long after he was born. But I'm too late to see the house, as it was demolished in the early 2000s for a pedestrian apartment block. And the family received 4 units, which were handed down to the 3 sons or their descendants. I'm told I can stay there whenever I wish. One of the 4 units is reserved as a memorial for Willie Chung Sing. He was a generous man. He set my parents up in a new shop, W. Chung Sing & Co. at 99 Liverpool Street. He gave them a beautiful Stuart crystal set for their wedding, and I still have one bowl. And he gave my mother this carved camphorwood chest that she used throughout her life. From the 4 counties, I taxi through fog to Canton in air-conditioned comfort. My driver's girlfriend in the rear uses her mobile phone to translate my English into Chinese. I contrast these 2 hours with the 2 days my mother took with her father as a child to trek the same distance to Canton, going by foot, by ferry, and sedan chair with an overnight stay in the 1930s. In Guangdong's bustling capital, where my uncles attended school in Canton, I used documents from Helen Henry to track down the 2-story gin investment property where my mother slept with her 3 brothers like planks on the floor, literally on the floor above. And Helen's mother, big brother Fon's wife, Arthur, spent her later years here until assisted back to Hobart for her final days. It's now sold, and a cafe where I lunch on a $2 bowl of steaming noodles. I muse on 1930s Canton, when it was plagued by beggars, pickpockets, and would-be kidnappers, when Dorothy went to kindergarten during her father's business trips. But in the street with her father, she gripped his hand tightly and in her pocket kept a piece of paper with her name, Clear Moon, and address written in Chinese characters, just in case. Outside in the street, I think of the emaciated rickshaw carrier who mesmerized my mother as he ate his lunch of a bowl of rice and a single slice of sausage. I taxi to Sacred Heart Cathedral, where my aunt Joyce at 16 was baptized into Catholicism because she felt so unloved by her mother, she sought Christ's love. And later, back in Hobart, she had the whole family converted to Catholicism and baptized at St. Mary's Cathedral. That's Joyce, there on the left, the three girls. In the Friendship Store in Canton, formerly reserved for foreigners only, I look for silk knickers that I've bought over the years in Beijing's Friendship Store, but today I'm out of luck. But while I'm wandering around in the store looking at the silk lingerie, my assistant points to another section and says, that assistant over there says she knows you. Curious, I asked to meet her. And then a rather shy Li Tang Zhang comes over and repeats, I know you. How? I ask. And she picks up her phone, she scrolls down and finds Guangdong News Online and its pictorial report of police finding my dragon. Serendipity. I'm in the right place, at the right moment, on the right floor of a multi-level department store in a city of 13 million. Now, I realize why I was hustled out of the Jin home and how media-savvy police seized on the chance of a good cop story. I later heard from local Guangdong people that the police are not always like that, but they just wanted to propagate their own propaganda, and this was a good chance. By next weekend, I'm again amazed to find myself back in Dragonfield Village as part of the tour group. We were given no warning of this, but at the end of the day, we suddenly find the bus stops at Dragonfield Village. And as we dismount from the bus, just as darkness descends, word spreads and villagers abound. And in the din, I'm nudged by Sydney-sider Mari Chen, who tells me, this person says she's related to you. 84-year-old Ya Jie Zhen turns out to be my mother's cousin, my second cousin. While I stay downstairs, talking to the villagers and showing them Guangdong news online, upstairs in the dark, photographer Jonathan O'Donnell is taking shots of the main shrine and part of the atrium below, the upper shrine lacework. He captures a colourful phoenix and dragon, and the ravaged kitchen from a ledge high above, and Sophie Couchman looking up through the atrium, a rice thresher, some storage barrels, a shrine in the atrium, Kate Bagnall from high on the ledge above in the ravaged kitchen, and the entrance shrine, almost all photographed despite the darkness. When the group leaves, I stay on. My cousin points to her late father's house next door, number 11, now let out. And this evokes my mother's words. Dad's brother built a house next door to ours. And a third brother also built a house outside grandfather's back door in the next lane, lane number 6. Both brothers owned stores in Elizabeth Street, Hobart. One, my cousin's father, asked grandfather to move from his store at 152 Elizabeth Street to his brother's store at 153, now part of Utas, so that he, the brother, could return to China. The Utas housing development sits on the site of grandfather and his 2 brothers' businesses, as well as businesses of other Jin Henry family members. My cousin shows me her own modernized home. If grandfather had stayed in the village, would I be one of these villagers? Would I have been victim to all the political turmoil and all the upheaval and deprivations that they've endured until only recent times? How privileged I am to have been born and raised in the modern Australia with its system of democracy and rule of law. Yaje also tells me that after Fon's brother, Fon's wife, and 2 older children fled in 1948, other clan members moved into grandfather's house. And that explains why Qinguo Zhen, the keeper of the key, says he's keeping the key for my relatives who fled to America, and why Guangdong News Online reported that the clan members owning the property now live in America. From my luxurious 60 square meters at Canton's White Swan Hotel, I gaze upon the muddy Pearl River with its myriad of seacraft and ponder that accident of history. which drove my paternal grandfather Chung and both my maternal great-grandfather and grandfather Jin to leave their homeland, to make that arduous, foul voyage by steerage to the unknown toil of Tasmania. Both great-grandfather Jin and grandfather Chung died in their homeland. My father Charles and his two sons, Christopher and Philip, paid tribute to Willie Chung Sing and made offerings to his spirit in 2006. However, World War II and China's Civil War prevented the repatriation of grandfather Jin's body after he passed away in Hobart in 1941. The family intended to disinter his body and return it for burial. When grandmother died in 1947, the prospect of communism and the Jin Henrys' increasing ties with the Apple Isle kept the couple at Cornelian Bay. My venture into the unknown is tribute to all my ancestors. But in searching for grandfather Jin's dream home, homage to him and his wish to return to the motherland. A pilgrimage that also fulfills my own dream, spurred by my dragon chase of 1984, but conceived in the Hobart of my childhood. I hope I've taken their spirits to where they wished to rest, and that I transmitted something of the spirit of Tasmania to my warm and welcoming clansmen in Dragonfield Village.